For Primetime Local News, we are chatting with today an author and musician, Shane Wilson, who has won 2 book awards on this critically acclaimed novel called The Smoke in His Eyes. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, we're glad to be able to have you on here. Now, of course, I always start off with this as usual with these author interviews, and I would like to ask for this novel with having all these awards, what can people expect when reading this novel?
It's always the hardest question for, I think, a writer to answer about his or her own book, right? Is like, what is it about? I know, like, so for me, it's about it's about creativity and what it means to be an artist. And it was informed by all these questions I had after I published my first novel about why is it that certain people feel creative and why is it that certain people feel the need to share that creativity with the world. And so those are the questions that I wanted to explore in the novel. I think that what most people want to know is like, who are the characters and what's going on, right? And so the novel is the story of this musician named TJ, who is a very technically proficient musician, but feels a disconnection in his art from what he wants it to be. And he meets who is kind of like the literal embodiment of inspiration in the novel, a character named Muna, and she helps him sort of navigate his own childhood trauma and mine that experience for inspiration that he can then channel into more honest art. And so that's sort of like the plot of it, if you will, right? It's about different kinds of artists. TJ's a musician. He has another friend named Leela who is also a musician. They're in a band together. This third character, Muna, is a visual artist. Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to explore the different reasons why we create certain things, and what we do with that creation once it's done.
We were already kind of speaking about how many awards that you have won for this novel, but since the release, how has support and response been that you've witnessed with fans and readers so far since the release?
Yeah, it's interesting because this is a novel that is a few years old now, and when it initially released, it was well received, and then everything kind of shut down, so I was unable to, go on the promotional circuit like I would have liked to. And I think what was kind of lucky, you mentioned the awards, is that a lot of the awards ended up opening the window of uh, possibility for more books in terms of when they were published. I think maybe as a result of COVID or whatever. And so normally this book would have missed the deadline, so to speak, right, for this award. But then because of the expanded window, we were able to get it in and see just to see what happens, because I've got a new novel coming in the fall. And so in the name of trying to generate more interest and all of that, right, we decided to put it out there. And yeah, so like there's been a little bit of a second wave of support for it as a result of the newfound success, right?
Okay, and I'm going to ask about that novel coming up here in the fall soon. But first, before we get to that, I want to kind of start off with your experience, being a musician and an author. How has that transition been from being a musician into writing novels and kind of transitioning into this kind of different career path?
Okay, so this is complex as well. I was not a musician really for most of my life. I've always been a writer. I remember when I was in like second grade, I wrote this dumb story about how I was afraid of this big dog that lived across the street from my parents' house, and I drew a cover for it and pasted it on the front of this like three-pronged folder, and I made like a little book, right? And I like let people read it and everything. And my parents bought a typewriter, an old like click clack typewriter when I was a kid, and they taught me how to spell on it. I would just ask them how to spell words, and I would like hunt them out. So like I was always like the mechanics of writing were always a part of me, right? And my household was very storytelling centric. My grandfather was a great storyteller, so the idea of stories was always really important to me. Um, it was not until I started working on the second novel that I ever picked up a guitar, because I knew that this character that I wanted to write was a guitarist, and I wanted it to seem uh, genuine, right? I wanted the way that I wrote that character and the way that I wrote the actual motions of playing the instrument. I wanted it to feel legitimate to someone. If someone were to pick up this novel who was also a guitarist, like I wanted them to be able to see that experience on the page, right? And so I sort of taught myself to play as I was writing this book. And in a lot of ways, TJ's journey to writing this one honest song over the course of the story was also my journey toward writing my first song, because I ended up writing an original song that is named in the book, right? And so now when I get to do these readings, I get to play this song that is in the book. That's kind of a cool sort of three-dimensional way of interacting with the text, right?
And now, exactly what will this next novel be about that's coming out in the fall?
Yeah, so all of these novels so far have been written in what I would call like an extended universe, sort of like what Marvel does, where all these things kind of overlap, but at the same time they're all standalone stories. And so this third novel is another piece of that puzzle, right? I'm building out this like contemporary fantasy world where there are like magical beings that populate the world that we live in, right? And so I've been piecing this mythology together over the course of multiple novels. And this third novel is going to kick off sort of a trilogy that's set in this world that's going to answer almost all of the rest of the questions. Yeah, so the next novel is kind of a apocalyptic sort of story, and it kicks off sort of the end of the world that will take place over the next three books. Yeah, which I'm not sure that it's a great time for that kind of story, or maybe it's the perfect time for that kind of story, but we'll see, right?
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us today, Shane.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.